president is deciding to withdraw from this race, but also from the donors who, up until this point, were holding back that money just because there have been so many questions about his viability as a candidate. Now, of course, White House teams are learning about this as we have been on air. White House officials are in a call about this decision now and what this means moving forward. But certainly everyone absorbing this news as the president, again, had closely held this decision, made it over the last couple days, and then notified his senior teams only moments before putting out that letter. Now, the president did say in this letter that he will address the nation later this week. We don't know when that will be just yet, but he himself has acknowledged that he will also be addressing the American public over this decision to not seek re-election.
Yeah, and he has meetings with world leaders this week. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, on Tuesday. We'll wait to see what all that looks like. Priscilla, I'll let you keep checking in with your sources. Let us know if you hear anything new from White House officials. I want to go to Jeff Zeleny, CNN's chief national affairs correspondent, because, Jeff, this creates a huge amount of uncertainty for the person who thought he was challenging Joe Biden on this ticket, Donald Trump, who I should note is already sending out fundraising emails talking about keeping their foot on the pedal as they are looking at all of this and this new dynamic that the Trump campaign finds themselves in.
Caitlin, it absolutely does. And really, we can throw out any of the polling that has been done up until this point. Yes, the record of Vice President Harris will be front and center in this. Of course, she still owns the accomplishments and also the controversial aspects of the Biden-Harris administration. But until she becomes the nominee, if she does, as Ron was saying, we should leave open the possibility for something else happening. I mean, I think none of us would have sort of projected this happening already. So let's leave our minds open to this historic making campaign. However, the Trump campaign clearly is going to be focusing immediately on Vice President Harris. But we know the battleground states that have already been playing out, but a couple questions here. Does her candidacy, should she be the nominee, make some states more competitive, like a Georgia, for example, like a North Carolina? Does it make other states less competitive? So what we know about this campaign, what we've been talking about, how it's, 6 or 7 states, that is not necessarily where this is going to stand perhaps a month from now. But there is no doubt that this is going to upend sort of all of the assumptions here. And as you were talking with Priscilla there, I was speaking with one other senior Biden official. And let me bring this news to you, Caitlin. President Biden's decision, I'm told, to leave the race was reached within the last 48 hours or so, a senior advisor explains to me as he was consulting family members and top advisors. He did not have a single final meeting in Rehoboth, Delaware, where he has been spending the weekend, I'm told, but he was in conversation with them. But an advisor says the president, quote, was not dug in, but he was studying all of this data coming in, and he became convinced that he would, quote, weigh down the ticket and potentially be a distraction and complication for defeating Donald Trump in November. So, of course, for the last 3+ weeks, he has heard the call from so many. But, Caitlin, it became even louder than we know. A lot of the Democratic office holders and officials, the senators and House members, came out and said he should step aside. That was largely for their own political purposes at home. They were in tough races. But it was the information, the data, I'm told, presenting him with the fact that he was suddenly potentially losing states like a Minnesota, like a New Hampshire. So the battleground map so big, it changed the state of the race here. So history will judge this period as one more Joe Biden decision that took a while to get there. As you know from covering the White House, we covered it alongside. President Biden is often very deliberate. Some Democrats believe too slow in making a decision in this fast-moving world now. But by deciding on this Sunday, Democrats still believe they have time to reset the campaign. We shall see.
Yeah, I mean, you can't overstate the enormity of a decision like this. This is something that we talked to Bill de Blasio about this on Friday night, and he was saying, he was in the presidential race not very long when he was running for the Democratic nomination, but he was talking about how even for him, how much it weighed on him to make a decision like that, to get out of the race. And he was saying what President Biden had in front of him was 10 times that he's looking at this race, and what a personal decision this is to completely reshape your legacy by making a decision as enormous as this one. And it's interesting that your reporting is that he came to this within the last 48 hours because he got that positive COVID diagnosis last week when he was out in Nevada and had that time to where he was self-isolating to really be alone and weigh a decision as enormous as this one.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's so poignant to think that this is the third presidential race that Joe Biden has stepped away from, of course, back in 1988, in 2008, and now. But the circumstances, of course, are totally different, and the stakes are so much higher. And the fact of the matter is, he is a consumer of news. He reads the newspapers, watches television. He's not in, he's sort of physically in a bubble, but is, a modern day president. So he was aware of what was happening, but it was not until, I'm told, really some people who had his best interests at heart, he thought. Yes, he was angry, we've reported, at Nancy Pelosi for speaking so openly and publicly about this, but it's hard to imagine that those comments did not play a role here. I think as we look back on this, a turning point will be when the former House Speaker essentially reopened the door that he had tried to close by saying, "I am running." And he, did not perform much better in those the television interviews that he did sort of in the days after that. So certainly now he will have to defend his decision to remain in the office of presidency. We will see how that plays out. But from here forward, of course, the most urgent question is, does Vice President Harris become the Democratic nominee? We may know that in about 2 weeks' time, Caitlin.
Yeah, and also it's notable, Jeff, just given we did both cover Biden, he made this decision at his Rehoboth Beach, Delaware beach house. It's kind of a place where he would often go to think about big issues. A lot of presidents have used Camp David. Obviously, Rehoboth Beach is often a place of solace for this president. So to make this decision there is also notable. I want to bring in MJ Lee, who is at the White House for us. And MJ, obviously, this decision is landing like a bombshell for a lot of the White House staff who may not have been in that inner circle around Biden to find out about this. What are you hearing from White House officials, but also from Democratic donors that you've been speaking with?
Yeah, Caitlin, I know you know this better than anyone. There is something that a lot of folks who have known President Biden for a long time will often say about the president and his decision-making process. They'll say, he is somebody who can typically take a really long time, sometimes painfully a long time, to deliberate over a really important decision. And then at the end of the day, ultimately, the decision he ends up making is the most obvious one, at least the most obvious one to the people around him. And I think what we saw today and the events and the days leading up to today is precisely that. We have seen the president really think this over for more than 3 weeks now since that CNN debate at the end of June. He has had a barrage of criticism, so many around him telling him that the right thing to do for the country and for this race in November is for him to get out. It has taken him a long time, at least in the view of so many around him, to get to this point. But at the end of the day, I think this was clearly for the party the obvious choice for him to make. We know this because of a number of really important factors that you need to have behind you if you're going to try to run a winning campaign. We know that the money was drying up. We've been talking about that a lot. Donors were no longer willing to write big checks to support President Biden. The Democratic support was starting to really fall apart. Every day, every hour, we had Democratic elected officials coming out to say that they couldn't get behind the president. The polls obviously were starting to show a real slippage, and including in these key battleground states that really are so critical to the president having any chance of winning and defeating Donald Trump in November. And I think this was always going to be President Biden and the campaign running in full force until the moment that he wasn't. There's no real way for you to run for president 50%. There's no way for you to sort of half be a candidate. And I think that is sort of what we have seen play out, the dynamics that we have seen in the recent days. Up until yesterday, we know that the senior-most folks on the Biden campaign were not even talking about the possibility of the president dropping out. We had been told earlier today that some of the most senior advisors in the West Wing were still not talking about the possibility of the president dropping out. And then here we have it, a really closely held decision unveiled by the president himself in a letter that we are told was only given to the top folks in his campaign and at the White House moments before the president decided that he was ready to go public with it. I also just want to take a moment to talk about the importance of the president quickly coming out to fully endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris. You know, there is so much uncertainty right now about how exactly this race is going to unfold in the coming days and weeks. We are obviously in a really unprecedented situation, but it was important for a lot of people in the Democratic Party to hear the words coming straight out of the president's mouth that in his eyes, the person that needs to take the torch from the president is his deputy, is the person that he chose, is the person who he said could take on the role of the presidency on day one. I was just talking to campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond, and he said there's no question about it. This is an example of President Biden doing the right thing, and he said he was really glad to hear the president coming out to publicly endorse Kamala Harris, and that the campaign is going to be behind her, but sort of the machinations of exactly how the campaign is going to sort of transition over to making that sort of the campaign's operation in the coming days. Obviously, all of those things need to get figured out. But look, I think if there was a scenario where the president had delayed endorsing Kamala Harris in any way, that could have created even more chaos and even more confusion. And I think that was clearly a situation that the president wanted to avoid, Caitlin.
Yeah, MJ Lee, obviously a lot of dynamics at play here. Also dynamics not just there at the White House, down the street at Capitol Hill. We have Manu Raju, CNN's chief congressional correspondent, also here with us. And Manu, I know we're getting reaction from the Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. What is his reaction to this major news from President Biden dropping out of the 2024 race?
Yeah, this just came in praising Joe Biden for his time in office, but also not endorsing Kamala Harris in this statement that he just put out. He called him one of the most accomplished and consequential leaders in American history. He said that in less than one term, he praised him for his work in what he said is rescuing the nation from a once-in-a-century pandemic. He praised his economic leader, and he says he, quote, saved our country by defeating the insurrectionist in chief. He went on to say that America is a better place because of Joe Biden, but no mention of what is next. But I can tell you, Caitlin, in talking to Democrats over the past hour, one, a lot of them are surprised. Some of them did not see this coming, but there is a sense of relief among so many Democrats, particularly ones in difficult re-election races who are concerned that Joe Biden would essentially drag them down with him, worried that it would effectively undercut their ability to take back the House. But one thing that is also uncertain in my conversation so far, is Kamala Harris the best candidate for them to take back the House, to keep control of the Senate? That is a debate that is still ongoing within the Democratic Party, that is still uncertain about whether or not the party will simply all fall in line behind her, or whether or not they believe there's another candidate who could be better for this, suited for them, down ticket. That is something that is still playing out behind the scenes, and perhaps that is one reason why Democratic leaders have not been quick to endorse Kamala Harris the way that Joe Biden has been, because they're trying to assess the impact. They want to talk to their members who are coming back to town tomorrow. But Joe Biden's decision, too, coming on the heels of Congress returning into session tomorrow, where we were expecting even more Democrats to come out, call for him to step aside. 36 had done so publicly. More would do so at the end of the day. But this is a shell-shocked Democratic Party scrambling to figure out what's next. A lot of people are happy about this decision, but what does Kamala Harris mean at the top of the ticket? Will she get the nomination? And what does it mean for the rest of their party? All huge questions that they're still grappling with at this key time, Caitlin.
Yeah, major questions, Manu. And I should note we are now hearing that President Biden and Senator Schumer spoke before President Biden shared the letter announcing online that he was exiting the 2024 race. Manu, thank you for that.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, and thanks very much for joining us. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. Caitlin Collins is joining us from New York. And I want to begin with the major breaking news we're following right now. President Biden just announced that he's dropping out of the 2024 presidential race and publicly endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee. He made this truly historic announcement in a statement he tweeted out just before 2 p.m. Eastern earlier today. A stunning decision that he kept very close to his vest, alerting his senior White House advisors and campaign staff only moments before making this public letter to the American people public. And we're also just learning, go ahead, Caitlin.
Yeah, well, we're learning about how quickly this decision was made and also how recently. Our Jeff Zeleny is told this decision was one that President Biden came to within the last 48 hours as he consulted his family, his top advisors on the phone while he is still self-isolating from COVID. His statement that he published just a short time ago reads in part, quote, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." We have a team of correspondents covering this entire breaking story. Wolf, I want to start with CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who is in Delaware with the president where he's been. And Priscilla, obviously, this is major news. Manu just describing a shell-shocked Democratic Party following this news from President Biden. What else are we learning about just how he came to this decision that he resisted for 3 weeks from members of his own party, but now has acquiesced to those calls to get out of the race?
And a shock too, Caitlin, to White House and campaign officials, though he notified his senior teams right before putting out this letter. This is certainly coming as shocking news to those here that have joined him, as well as across the campaign. Now, the president, as you mentioned, was here and is here in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, at his residence, where he has been self-isolating from that positive COVID diagnosis from last week. Now, it was over this course of time that the president was around his senior advisors, his inner circle, which we had learned had grown even tighter by the day, and he was deliberating. Of course, the president had been hearing from Democratic lawmakers, allies, donors over the course of the last more than 20 days since the presidential debate, calling on him to withdraw from the race. We saw that over the course of the last week and including yesterday. But even so, even as lawmakers were making their call for him to drop out, the campaign was signaling that it was a full steam ahead, that they planned to get him back on the campaign trail and that he was not going anywhere and there was no plan B scenario. That, as of this morning, as the senior campaign brass was saying that the president was in it to win it. And then this afternoon, hearing directly from the president in this letter where he says that he is not going to seek re-election. And he also notes in this letter that he will be addressing the nation himself later this week. Of course, the president still self-isolating here at his residence in Delaware. Now, right after putting out that letter, the president also answering one of the major questions going forward, and that was whether he would put his full weight behind Vice President Kamala Harris, and that is exactly what he did, saying that he endorses the vice president to be the nominee and calling on the Democratic Party to come together. Now, it has been almost about an hour since that news broke, Caitlin. I have been hearing from sources who work closely and advise donors. They say it is an avalanche of money coming in. The same donors that were withholding those big checks because of the questions over the president's candidacy are now pouring in money now that this announcement has been made. Democratic lawmakers also saying that they acknowledge the president's accomplishments and his record, but they are also standing behind him in this decision. So this opens up a whole new phase only weeks from the Democratic National Convention, where there are still so many questions about this moment, this uncertain moment, and where we go from here. But the president, in addition to saying that he will not seek re-election, is saying that the vice president, or that he endorses the vice president. We should note on the vice president, her schedule today was to be in Washington, D.C. I have reached out to her staff to see where she is now, as well as whether she has spoken to the president. She was in Massachusetts just yesterday speaking to donors at a fundraiser. Also, she has been completely behind the president in this moment. Aides I have spoken to over the last several weeks consistently told me there was no daylight between the two. Now, of course, we'll see what happens from here. But our colleague John King is reporting that the vice president does intend to lay low publicly until the president speaks to the nation. She has a couple campaign stops on her calendar this week. We'll see if she'll move forward from that. But Caitlin, just to go back here, the president really making a stunning announcement today and saying he is not seeking re-election, saying that he is endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris, and all of this coming together in the last couple days while he was self-isolating at his residence here in Delaware. Sources often told us that it was going to be the president that made this decision. That's exactly what he did. Caitlin?
Yeah, clearly a period of self-reflection. Priscilla Alvarez, thank you for that. And Wolf Blitzer, I mean, you're just joining us now on this breaking news. Wolf, you obviously covered the White House for a very long time. You've covered multiple presidents. I just wonder what you make of this pretty stunning news, even despite the fact that it was kind of a drumbeat building within his own party for 3 weeks. But still, the stunning news to see a sitting president step down from running for re-election.
And the way that the president made this announcement in a public statement that he posted on social media, as opposed to directly addressing the American public. If Priscilla Alvarez is still there, I have a couple questions for her. Priscilla, has the White House or the White House physician or anyone at the White House updated us on the president's condition? We know he's self-isolating from COVID in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware right now at his home there. How is he doing?
Yeah, Wolf, we actually received a letter from the White House doctor earlier today, and he said that the president's condition, his symptoms were improving, quote, significantly. We have been hearing from the doctor routinely since the president was diagnosed with COVID. And yesterday, the doctor said that his symptoms were improving and that he was progressing. Today, using the term significantly to describe how the president was feeling in terms of his symptoms, apparently being more mild than the president himself feeling better. So the White House doctor, again, has been updating us, did so before we received this letter today to say the president is feeling better. Of course, the president has also been taking Paxlovid and took another dose of that today, but he has still been self-isolating over all this time. And since he arrived here in Delaware on Wednesday, we have not seen him since then. So we are still waiting for guidance on what his schedule looks like this week. Of course, the Israeli Prime Minister's office saying that the two are expected to meet on Tuesday. We have not received White House confirmation of that meeting, but it was going to be a busy week ahead for the president, and he appeared to be on track to be better, to meet those commitments. But we're still waiting to get that updated guidance from the White House as to when the president will be coming out of that self-isolation, Wolf.
We hope he has a speedy recovery from COVID. Another important development, normally under these circumstances, you would think the president immediately would go on television and announce to the American people what's going on. And now the White House is saying in this public letter that the president has posted on social media that he'll do it later in the week. Is that the result of COVID, that he's still suffering, that maybe his voice is not that strong yet? Has the White House explained why he's going to go on television later in the week as opposed to tonight?
We are asking those questions, Wolf, to try to get more clarity as to when exactly he's referring to in this letter when he says later in the week. There is nothing in this White House note from his doctor that suggests that his symptoms aren't improving enough to address the nation. But again, he is here in his residence in Delaware. So it's unclear, too, where he would like to make those remarks when he addresses the public about not seeking re-election. So we are reporting, we're working our sources to try to get more information. Well, we also can't sort of overstate here how stunning a news this was this weekend to get this letter here around 2 in the afternoon. So there are still a lot of pieces being put together here, but we do know that the president wants to address the nation from the letter that he put out. And so we are trying again to get more clarity as to when that will be and why not tonight. But we do know that he is recovering. He's recovering well. I think the outstanding question here is where he wants to make those remarks from, because right now he is self-isolating at his residence here in Delaware.
And we, of course, hope he has a speedy recovery from this latest bout of COVID. Priscilla Alvarez on the scene for us in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where the president is recuperating his latest bout of COVID. Hope he has a speedy recovery. I want to bring in Jeff Zeleny right now. Jeff, am I the only one surprised that he's not addressing the American public tonight as opposed to later in the week? And do you suspect it's related to his bout with COVID?
I think that could be it. I mean, he is at his home in Rehoboth, Delaware. Certainly, as you know, Wolf, presidents can always have access to a live television camera. He could simply go downtown Rehoboth with a mask on. He could do that. But I think that he wanted to deliver this news himself, and I'm not sure what the harm is in waiting for him to return to the White House to address the nation. This is, I guess, one more example of how information is disseminated these days. But they did want to keep this closely held. Staff only learned about this, we're told, just moments before it was sent out. He wanted to control what has to be certainly the most difficult political decision he has ever made. But we are getting new information in from the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Jamie Harrison, who is saying that the work we must do now is unprecedented, but the party will undertake a transparent and orderly process to move forward. So what that means is that they are going to follow the rules, not get right behind Vice President Harris as the president has done. But I'm also learning behind the scenes really for the last week. No one was in Harris's world. Her supporters were trying to push the president out. But in the case he did make a decision, there's been a lot of whipping going on. And by that I mean making phone calls to delegates and try and line up the support for her. So that is happening even with more speed now this afternoon. But look, everyone is not going to come out and support her, but another Democrat official said, who is going to stand up and block her? So it looks like this would be moving that direction, but we shall see. No one would have predicted this just a month or so ago.
Yeah, it's a dramatic development, history unfolding, Manu. And as someone who spent 7 years as a White House correspondent, I know that if the White House and the president wanted to address the American public from Rehoboth Beach tonight, whether at his home or someplace else, he could have easily organized that. The White House media pool, which is always on the scene, ready to go, they could have set that up very, very quickly.
Yeah, perhaps there's something to do with his recovering from COVID. He wants to do it in a more presidential setting, maybe from the Oval Office, not necessarily from Rehoboth Beach. Perhaps it's all part of the calculation about how he wants to deliver a message that will go down in American history. I mean, when Lyndon B. Johnson, of course, decided not to run for re-election, that statement that he made is still, of course, being played today. That was such a historic message. This one will be remembered in the psyche of the American public. The big question is, where does this campaign go from here? How do the two parties realign their strategies going forward? Republicans, too. They are scrambling to try to figure out how to go about dealing with the fact that Kamala Harris may be at the top of the ticket. I talked to a number of Republicans in the run-up to this, expecting that perhaps this could happen. They were uncertain. What exactly do they say? Do they go after her political views? They tried to tag her to Joe Biden. They say she covered up for Joe Biden's mental challenges and mental acuity, his cognitive ability. Will that be part of it? And also, Wolf, lawsuits. How Republicans are signaling that they may try to fight this and try to prevent her state by state from getting onto certain ballots. Perhaps they can have some favorable rulings, can make it harder for Democrats going forward. All part of what is uncharted territory as a party try to assess what's next.
All right, hold on for a second.
I just want to say we have a statement from former President Bill Clinton and he is supporting Vice President Kamala Harris. This is a significant development here. We have not yet heard from some of the other presidents, but he's saying this in a statement. Now is the time to support Kamala Harris and fight with everything we've got to elect her. America's future depends on it. So you can imagine the weight something like that would have on these delegates.
Yeah, very significant development indeed. MJ Lee, our senior White House correspondent, is over at the White House right now. What are you learning, MJ?
Well, Wolf, we are obviously hearing from a lot of national Democrats since the president announced that he is dropping out, calling him a patriot, saying that he ultimately made the right decision and the decision that was right for the country. Put right and wrong aside for a second, Wolf. I think what became clear to the president and probably a few of the people around him really involved in making this decision was that ultimately he didn't really have a choice. We saw everything around him really crumbling at such a stunning pace over the last few weeks. whether it is the money drying up and donors saying that they were not willing to give to the president anymore, whether it was the growing chorus of Democratic elected officials saying that the president needs to go, whether it is the slipping in the polls that we have seen consistently over the last week or so, where not just in the national polls, but in the very battleground states that will be so important in determining whether President Biden could defeat Donald Trump. And the problem here was that in all of those major factors, there was every indication that in all of those things, they were all headed, continuing to head in the wrong direction. This didn't seem like a situation where you give it a couple more days and the situation improve. And that really was what the president was contending with. One source that I was talking to, just in terms of how closely held this decision was, I'm told that he let the staff know at around 1:45, and this is his most senior, most members of the team. And, the tweet that he sent out, that his account sent out with the letter announcing that he was going to be dropping out, went out around 1:46. So clearly the decision was made. And this wasn't the president discussing whether to do this or not with his senior most staff. This was him informing his staff that the decision was made. I also just want to note, in the letter that he sent, he said he is going to focus the rest of his term on making sure that he is finishing out the rest of the first term as well as he can, and really focusing on really just doing the duties of the presidency. What he didn't say there, of course, is the role that he potentially now has to play in supporting his vice president, Kamala Harris, who he endorsed. He now is potentially the biggest surrogate that Kamala Harris could have out on the campaign trail. And this kind of support obviously could come in a lot of different ways. As you were discussing before, the president did say that he is going to be addressing the nation about this decision later in the week. We don't know exactly when, but we expect that he is going to address that decision to endorse Kamala Harris as vice president as the next person that he is going to pass the torch to. The one other final thing I will just note, this might be for a lot of Democrats sort of the president finally making the right decision. There is also a lot of anger, a lot of bad blood, a lot of hard feelings about the way all of this was handled by various Democrats in the party. I was on the phone with campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond, and he unleashed some really harsh words on the donors that in recent days had refused to give to President Biden. And he said that what the donors had done was create a self-fulfilling prophecy, because essentially when the money dries up, there is no way that you can win. And he was saying, look, the donors basically ensured that this was a no-win situation for the president. He said the donors now better pony up, and we are actually seeing the first signs of donors actually turning around and saying, yeah, now that he has decided to step down, we are going to continue supporting this ticket. Wolf.
Dramatic developments indeed, and historic developments we're watching very, very closely right now. MJ Lee at the White House, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to our panel shortly. I want to go to Caitlin Collins, who's also covering all of this for us. Caitlin, these are dramatic developments, and it's come as a surprise to a lot of us after the President of the United States for days and days kept saying he's in it to win it. He's not going anywhere. He's staying in the race. Then all of a sudden, he posts this letter to the American public saying he's no longer going to run.
Yeah, and of course, Wolf, he is recovering from COVID-19 and still experiencing symptoms, though his doctor said in an update just this morning, I read the letter this morning at about 9 a.m., that he is recovering and those symptoms had improved significantly. So that could also play a factor in how we are learning this dramatic breaking news from the president himself in a letter that was posted online announcing he is not going to seek the election and the Democratic nomination for this November to challenge Donald Trump for the presidency. Jamal Simmons is here with us. He is a CNN political commentator, but also, and more importantly in this moment, the former communications director for Vice President Harris. And Jamal, I want to talk to you about the Harris dynamic of this, because Senator Mark Warner of Virginia has just lined up behind her. We're watching closely to see what Democrats are saying about this. But first, you worked inside the Biden White House. What's your reaction to this news from the president?
It's an incredible amount of, we kind of thought this was coming, but gosh, it's still so sad, right? I mean, Joe Biden is this American hero. He's such a patriot. He's somebody who saved us from Donald Trump 4 years ago, if you're a Democrat. And so to see him have such a successful political career, a successful presidency, But Father Time is unforgiving. And over time, it became clear that this probably wasn't going to be able to work. So for those of us who were inside, and I think Democrats I've heard from in the last hour or so, there's an incredible amount of excitement about the future, yet sadness about Joe Biden and losing him as a political leader.
Yeah, and of course, all the calls for him to drop out had been talking about what it would mean for his legacy. That's what Colorado Senator Bennett said to me when he was saying essentially that he did not believe Biden could defeat Donald Trump if he remained on the ticket. But with Biden's statement about 20 minutes after he posted this letter saying that he is going to endorse Vice President Harris as the Democratic nominee, we're watching these statements. We're seeing people like Senator Mark Warner, progressive House member Jamal Bowman getting behind her as the Democratic nominee. Is that what you expect to see from the Democratic Party, or is this going to kind of become this complicated contest where you are seeing other Democrats throw their hat in the ring for this nomination?
No, for about 10 days or so, I've been hearing about this movement, particularly of moderate senators, people who are on the line in the upcoming states, a lot of donors who frankly weren't big Kamala Harris fans, a year ago, who've been calling around saying, listen, if this works out and she's the nominee, we will move over. I would expect, I call them the super friends, right? You'll start to see more of the super friends come together. And by that, I mean, we've already seen a statement from President Bill Clinton from what I just heard on air. I think you may hear from President Barack Obama. You may hear from some of the other big luminary names in the Democratic Party who will come out and say Kamala Harris is the person. Here's the reason why, Caitlin, is because we just don't have a lot of time. We keep saying it's 4 months, but it's not really 4 months. We're about 2 months away from the convention. Once we get to the convention, we're less than 3 months to Election Day. And so when you think about that, literally, you've got so much to do. I don't know that anybody's working on a logo, right? You need a Kamala Harris logo for the yard signs. Somebody's got to print those signs. They got to ship them out to all the states. You've got to make sure that there are going to be what staffing changes are going to occur inside the campaign. And we don't know what that might look like. She's going to also need to, again, obviously have a new travel schedule, and everything is going to change. And so you've got to figure out how do you make that work in a very short amount of time. And I'm hearing people talking about that, but it's more than a notion.
Yeah, and we've gotten a statement from the Clintons as well, both Clintons, Bill and Hillary, getting behind Harris for this nomination. Talk about those big names that are coming out. Everyone's going to be watching this closely. Jamal, I want you to stand by because I want more on your thoughts on this, but we are getting new reporting about conversations between President Biden and Vice President Harris. I want to go back to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, who is covering all of this from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Priscilla, what are you learning?
Caitlin, I'm told by a source that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris spoke today. It's unclear exactly at what time they spoke. Remember, the president put out his letter publicly that he would not seek re-election earlier this afternoon. But the president made clear after that letter that he was putting all of his support behind Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee, and also calling on the party to come together. Now, the vice president was on the trail yesterday. She was at a fundraiser in Massachusetts, where, again, she was defending the administration's record and also trying to underscore the stakes of the election. It was a fundraiser that brought in more than $2 million. Today, however, she was back in Washington, D.C. at her residence and with her staff. So this latest reporting is that the president and the vice president have spoken. That, according to a source who I spoke with, we're still trying to get more information as to what that conversation looked like and when exactly it happened, but significant all the same.
Yeah, of course, and also fascinating to learn about these conversations that he was having. Obviously, you expect him to speak with the vice president about this. Priscilla, keep us updated on what you're learning about this. We also have Van Jones joining us. He is CNN's senior political commentator and a former Obama administration official. And Van, obviously, you and I were talking a lot about this dynamic and how this was ultimately going to play out when we were covering the Republican convention in Milwaukee last week. And with this news, this entire campaign has just upended itself.
Yeah, there's a lot of political stuff. The Democratic Party is a family. At the end of the day, this is a family matter. Joe Biden's body may not be as strong as it used to be. His language skills may not be as sharp as it used to be. His heart is as big as ever. His heart is as big and as true and as strong. And this is the difference between a politician and a leader. He made a selfless decision, and people are heartbroken. Even people who are pushing for this to happen. It's kind of like like when your grandpa, you got to take the keys, and everybody, you got to take his keys, you got to take his keys, you got to, and he's fighting and he's fighting, and everybody's so frustrated, and then you finally get the keys back, and then you just cry, because this is somebody that you love, this is somebody that you care about, this is somebody who was there for you, this is somebody you wouldn't be here without him, and you have to take something from him. Now, this is not, look, politics is politics, but this is a human moment for one of the great humans in America. This is a huge moment for him, for his family, for all of us who love him, for all of us who wanted him to get across the finish line. But if you're a young person watching this is leadership. This is patriotism. This is what it means to put the country first, and put the party first, and put the cause first. When your arm gets tired, you let somebody else finish pitching the game. That's what Joe Biden has done, and he's done that for all of us. And so I just want to say, I don't know who's going to be the VP, the non-VP. I don't know anything about politics. I just know that I love this man. I care about this man. It was painful every day to sit up here and talk about him like he's just some problem for the party. Wait till we get to the convention. You're going to see people crying, standing, screaming, cheering. He may not get a chance to talk for 10 minutes. We finally get a chance to put our arm around this guy. He did the right thing for this country. He did the right thing for this party. All of us are going to be in this situation someday, and I hope that we take a moment to honor this man and to love this man. I love Joe Biden. I appreciate what he's done, and a lot of people are heartbroken today. Even if it's the right thing, it's still just horrible.
Well, and Van, I mean, on that point, which is a great point that I think resonates with a lot of people, of the personal nature of a decision like this. We often talk about things in a harsh political lens of who's going to fare better, what this looks like. I mean, I also have to imagine what it's been like the last 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks since that debate, to see, what the reporting has been behind the scenes of Democrats who wanted him to get out. On Friday night, the reporting was that he was seething over, seeing big allies of Pelosi come out and call on him to get out, even upset to a degree with his former running mate, President Obama. And just to see, what he personally has witnessed in these calls from his longtime allies, people who certainly praise his legacy, but said, it's time for this decision to be made.
But have we all gone through this with our own family members? Like, yeah, he's hurt, he's pissed. A lot of us wouldn't have careers. I wouldn't have a career without Joe Biden. Joe Biden picked me out of the puppy pile. He's the person that everybody says you work for Barack Obama. Now, I worked for Joe Biden when I was in the administration. I was on his middle class task force. All of us have known that embrace. All of us have gotten those phone calls and those cards when bad things have happened to us. So, that's a family. That's what it is. He's hurt now. He feels let down. He feels that his friends turned on him. In the fullness of time, he'll recognize that it was done out of love and as loving a way as possible. But at the end of the day, some people, and I don't want to mention any names and ruin this day, but some people will back their leader no matter what. Some people, they don't care how many people this man has hurt and how many laws he's broken, no matter how many bad things he's done, that's our leader, we're going to back him no matter what. But this party is not like that. This is not a cult. This is a political organization. And we believe in these principles. And if somebody is sick, if somebody can't do it, there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. If somebody can't do it, that's okay. And what you see with Joe Biden, yeah, everything was falling apart around him, but he could have stuck it out. There were people in this party who wanted him to stick it out. There are people in this party right now who are mad that he didn't stick it out. Don't act like it was all on one side. It wasn't about the donors. It was about, could this man hold together all of us anymore? And when he realized he couldn't, he did the right thing and he passed the baton. That is leadership. Pelosi did the same thing with Hakeem Jeffries. That's leadership. That's responsibility. That's what America's supposed to be about. I love Joe Biden. You have people on both sides of the fight in the party who are crying right now, who can't believe it right now. This is not a normal time, y'all. This isn't just politics. This is a moment in time to honor someone who for 50 years put this country first and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed. And today, he's sacrificed again. That's Joe Biden. I love Joe Biden. This country should get around Joe Biden and help our president through these last few months.
Jamal Simmons, you worked in that administration as well. I wonder what you make of how Van just laid out what a personal decision this was for President Biden to make after facing these calls for 3 weeks now, sustained calls from his own party. And obviously, you worked with him, you worked with Vice President Harris. I wonder what you make of that.
Yeah, listen. As I started out, it's a very sad day. I have heard both Van's sentiments and feel them. Right. I mean, there's nothing I found after the assassination attempt last Saturday, when Joe Biden went on television to tell us what was happening. I know people had different feelings. I felt a little easier about it, right? Knowing that Joe Biden was in charge, because here's somebody who was going to be willing to put the American public first and not just his own political needs, not just do what he thought was best for him. And listen, we can try to make this not about politics, and Van, I'm with you. This is a day for Joe Biden. But on the other side of this coin is a guy who is the antithesis of Joe Biden, right? Who's completely about Donald Trump, completely about putting himself first. So I think as we think about President Biden, all of us who know him and those of us who worked for him, like Van, really feel an incredible sense of loss. At the same time, this is going to help the Democratic Party finish Joe Biden's job, which is the point of what it was he was running for, which is to keep Donald Trump out of the office and to make America a better place that includes more people and has more opportunity for people. And I think that Kamala Harris is going to do a good job doing that. Let me just say this about her. I worked with her every single day. I met with her every single day. I talked to her on the phone just about every single day when I was there. This is a woman who has great public values. She knows what she's in the game fighting for. She's fighting for people who are being left behind, people who are being left out. She's been a prosecutor her whole life. I think that she is uniquely built for a moment. We've got a candidate who's got 34, felony convictions to go out and prosecute him every day. She's somebody who I think has an incredible ability to go out and inspire people and to get them excited about her. I remember seeing little girls. One of the reasons I went to work for the vice president was because I have a daughter. And I remember thinking that I wanted my daughter to have the same kind of model for her life that my son has when he thinks about Barack Obama. And I remember seeing little girls grab her by the hand and look at her like she's Superwoman, like she's Wonder Woman. I remember seeing older women who many of them didn't agree with her politically. They grab her by the hand and they have tears in their eyes and they'd say, "I never thought I'd see the day that a woman would serve in the White House." Those are the kinds of cases that I think as we go forward in this, what will become the next political campaign, I think we will see the kind of energy that and emotion that we're talking about today. We'll see those out of a lot of Americans.
Well, and Van, I know you said, you wanted to take the moment to reflect on what this means for President Biden, and rightfully so. But there are a lot of people watching, wondering, what happens next here. And everyone is carefully watching every single Democrat's statement on Biden's exit from this race. And you're seeing people like Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, both of the Clintons, Patty Murray, Tina Smith come out and say, not only acknowledge what President Biden just did here, but also get behind Vice President Harris. Do you think, what does that look like for other Democrats and those who may have considered throwing their hat in this race?
Look, there's been a very strong movement behind the scenes to try to line up support for Vice President Harris in case this happened, to make sure that if there was a transition, it would be an orderly one, or at least that there would be a center of gravity that was clear for people. And I think that operation, which was led by people who love Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I think has been very effective. And so I think that, if you're a swing state governor, if you're, a political rock star of some kind, you're going to look at that wall of support that's consolidated around Kamala Harris. You're probably going to think, do I want to fight all of that? And so, but however, I think we got to recognize there's still a process here. This is a party that follows the rules. The delegates still have to make the decision. There's a long process by which people are going to have to come to a considered opinion. And I think it's very clear that Vice President Harris has a tremendous amount of support in this party. It's very clear that the operation to make sure that support was visible and in place was effective. And I think, but at the same time, people think because Joe Biden said that's who it should be, that's automatically done. Nope, we are not a cult. This is not a dictatorship. All the delegates still get a chance to weigh in. We still have to go through our process. But right now, she is the overwhelmingly presumptive favorite to inherit this mantle, and that's what Joe Biden wants.
Van Jones, great to hear from you in this moment.
This.
Yeah, go ahead, Jamal. Go ahead. I think we lost Jamal's shot. We'll get him back for that final thought to see what he has to say, because obviously this is not just something we are hearing massive reaction from those who have left the White House, those still inside the White House as well, who found out 1 minute before President Biden posted this letter online. Jamal Simmons, Van Jones, thank you both. Wolf, obviously a pivotal moment for this Democratic Party, but also for Republicans as well, who are going to be watching this incredibly closely and with a lot of trepidation about who it is that's going to be replacing Joe Biden on that ticket for November.
And the President of the United States making it clear he wants his Vice President, Kamala Harris, to do exactly that. I want to get reaction to the history that's unfolding right now. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California is joining us right now. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. What's your reaction to this major decision from the President of the United States?
Today's decision by Joe Biden to not seek re-election shows the difference between a selfless president and in Donald Trump, a selfish person. And I've got a lot of gratitude, Wolf, toward the president for his entire career. He's stepped up, and oftentimes it was reluctantly when he could have devoted his priorities in other directions. You know, his career has been, essentially bookended by tragedy. Elected to the Senate, and then he lost his wife and his daughter, and he found a way to heal his family and help his constituents. And then as he leaves the vice presidency and wants to coast into essentially retirement, he loses his son, Beau, and the country is subjected to Donald Trump, and he stepped up once again. And so my children, they and many others will feed their families from the jobs he created. They'll drive on the roads he built. They'll power their computers and their phones by the chips that he manufactured. And they'll live in a land that are more arable and breathable because of the greenhouse emissions that he cut. So I'm eternally grateful to Joe Biden.
Do you support the Vice President, Kamala Harris, as the next Democratic presidential nominee, Congressman?
I fully support Kamala Harris. And in fact, she's been trained by the best. Joe Biden was a vice president himself, and so she probably had the best mentor to work under. And she's tough, she's smart, she's real, and she's everything that we need as we go up against somebody who would take away every freedom. Trump's Project 2025 would end abortion, force people into marriages. It would ban books and just be an all-out assault on our freedoms. And this vice president, as I said, she's tough, she's real, she's smart, and she's got what it takes.
We just got a joint statement from Bill and Hillary Clinton, Congressman. Let me read a couple sentences from this statement and get your reaction. We are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris and will do whatever we can to support her. And then they say, now is the time to support Kamala Harris and fight with everything we've got to elect her. America's future depends on it. Do you anticipate any major challenges to Vice President Harris getting the nomination from other members of your party?
I've seen a ton of other colleagues of mine and leaders weigh in to support Kamala Harris, and I'll let that process play out. But Wolf, I'll just lay it out like this. We can finish the work that Joe Biden has done to restore our democracy and build our economy, or we can turn the greatest country in the world over to a felon, judged rapist, 6-time bankrupt businessman who sent his friends to violently storm the last office from which he was fired. To me, the choice isn't hard, and it's pretty clear that Kamala Harris would be the best one to inherit that work.
Have you started thinking, Congressman, about who potentially she should choose as her running mate?
Well, we're blessed, as we have seen over the past couple of years, with a number of options and a very deep bench. And so all of us in every way are going to work to support her. But with Kamala, at the top of the ticket and many of the options she has, we can win the House, win the Senate, and win the White House. All of that is in play right now. And I'm just seeing reinvigoration from my constituents, my supporters, and people all over the country. Let's win is the mindset right now.
The Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson is warning that the GOP could file legal challenges over Democrats replacing Biden. Do you think there is any merit to that at all?
If I was faced with Donald Trump as my nominee and potentially Kamala Harris as the other side's, I would probably want to talk about process rather than substance as well. I'm not worried about that at all, Wolf. We've got a convention coming up. We have plenty of time. Again, Americans now have a clear choice as to where we could take this country.
Yeah, the Democratic convention coming up in about 2 weeks or so in Chicago. We'll all be there for that as well. There's also, as you know, Congressman, less than 4 months until the November election. Do you think that's enough time for Vice President Harris to run a winning campaign and to unite the Democrats?
Yes, and Democrats have been eager, to have, a moment like this and to build off of Joe Biden's successes. And right now, what you're going to see, of course, we're going to honor Joe Biden. And in fact, he's in the Hall of Fame of Democratic presidents. And the best thing that he has done is to prepare Kamala Harris, something that he knows a thing or two about from being prepared by President Obama. So, no, we're ready. On the resources side, we have offices in all of the swing states. And Wolf, I'm being flooded with messages of people who have told me that they're making, contributions and volunteer pledges beyond their reach and means right now because they know what's at stake. And again, Americans know the choice, and we're going to reject a felon, judged, rapist who stormed the Capitol the last time he lost an election in favor for the opportunity that we have ahead. I'm confident in who we are as Americans and the resilience we're going to show in the next 4 months.
Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Eva McKend, our CNN national politics correspondent, is here with us in the CNN newsroom. We're watching all of this dramatically. You've spent the last several weeks covering the vice president, and you've seen her in action. You've gone to a lot of her events. I assume she was given advance notice by the president that this is about to unfold.
Well, what I can tell you, Wolf, is that I have really been listening to key Democratic allies in this moment. I think that what they have to say is really instructive. I'm talking about Black-led voter turnout operations like Black Voters Matter, like Higher Heights. These are the groups that do the key laborious work of door knocking and actually turning out voters, organizing. And I don't think they necessarily felt empowered in the last couple of weeks because some of these organizers, they didn't think necessarily it was the best strategy for President Biden to step aside. But in the event that he did, and now that he has, they have always said that the Democratic Party must get behind Vice President Harris. LaTosha Brown telling me this afternoon, the bottom line is now that we are ready to go. We are grateful for Biden's service, and that's why we fought with him, for him, until the end. We expect the full Democratic apparatus to now support Vice President Harris, and if they don't, they will lose. And so these are the voices that really should be listened to at this moment because they are so key to the Democratic coalition. Lots of those Black female organizers will be on a phone call tonight.
She's been very active in the last few weeks, out there, very visible on the campaign trail, and she's been raising significant sums of money for the Democratic ticket as well. And you've been there along the way watching it all unfold. She clearly, I assume, was bracing for this possibility.
Well, she certainly wasn't telegraphing that, though, Wolf. Everyone on her team was really disciplined. She was really on message. She was focusing on reproductive rights. She had events with former Republican women in Michigan, trying to show in that pivotal battleground state that the administration could be one that had mass appeal. There was never any indication that she was really angling for this. Those in her orbit really describe it as a delicate dance because she never wanted to appear, or none of her allies wanted to appear as if they were pushing President Biden out of the way. It was a lot of focus over the last couple of weeks.
And Manu is with us still as well. Manu, now that the president has formally endorsed the Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic presidential nominee, a lot of other Democrats are falling in line.
Yeah, no question about it. We do expect a lot more. We've seen a lot of rank and file Democrats do so. We have not really seen the Democratic leadership yet offer its endorsement, trying to really assess what the playing ground is going to be, not trying to tip the scales one way or the other, trying to decide whether, frankly, they believe she'd be the best to be the person to take them to keep the White House in November. Barack Obama just put out a statement, Wolf, just moments ago, praising Joe Biden's service. He did stop short of offering an endorsement himself, really leaving this as an opportunity to praise Joe Biden, not getting into what is next. But that is going to be a big question. Where do the Democratic heavyweights come down? Do they try to rush to embrace Kamala Harris? I've been talking to Democratic strategists over the past hour or so since this news broke. They are trying to assess how she plays in some of those key races. Remember, what was Joe Biden's vulnerability? Young voters, oftentimes black voters, oftentimes brown voters. Can Kamala Harris shore up those key vulnerabilities, help piece together that Democratic coalition that really has been what Joe Biden has been struggling with to rebuild that coalition? But is she viewed as out of step in some of those more moderate districts? That's how Republicans will try to paint her if, in fact, she is a nominee. That is what the debate is going to be going forward. If she's the best candidate to rebuild that Democratic coalition, and if she can avoid being that polarizing presence that Republicans will undoubtedly try to make her out to be.
We're getting more reaction. Jeff Zeleny is with us as well. A lot of Democrats are reacting right now. Many of them are praising the president for this decision, but stopping short of publicly, formally endorsing the vice president, at least not yet.
Right. It's a split at this moment. The Clintons, we know, both former President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton have endorsed Harris. We are just getting, as Manu said, the new statement from former President Barack Obama in, and he does not endorse Harris in this statement. I am told by a senior advisor that that is not out of any question about her, but he wants to maintain the same role he did in 2020 in the primary campaign and stay out of it and be available to unite the party as needed. But Wolf, listen to this from former President Barack Obama, who of course chose Joe Biden as his running mate in 2008. They developed a close relationship, tense at times, but close as always. But Barack Obama says this: for him to look at the political landscape and decide he should pass the torch to a new nominee is surely one of the toughest decisions of his life. But I know he wouldn't make it unless he believed it was right for the country. He goes on to say that he's a patriot of the highest order. So this has a feel that Vice President Harris is also, I'm told, thinking about campaign leadership even before she officially would become the nominee. That will happen in a couple weeks, but there is no time to waste here. So I'm told that she would largely leave a campaign apparatus in place, but could bring in her own people as well. And some former Obama aides, some very senior ones, I'm told, are being discussed for that. So this is moving very quickly. But again, behind the scenes, even as people waited for President Biden to make this very difficult decision for him, there was a sense that some of this was in the works. So we shall see in the coming hours, probably, or certainly days, if anyone actually steps forward to challenge her. I think that is going to be a difficult thing for someone to do.
Interesting, and one thing, Manu, I want to go back to you for a second. The Nancy Pelosi statement that was just released, significant. This is the former House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. President Joe Biden is a patriotic American who has always put our country first. His legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history. Statement from Nancy Pelosi right there. But we didn't see in that statement a public formal endorsement of the vice president.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, too. She has been reportedly open to the idea of an open convention. What exactly would that look like? That is one question. That she has been engaged in so many behind-the-scenes talks with Democrats, sounding alarms about everything that's been going on within the Democratic Party. Of course, we know that she has spoken to President Biden himself about the concerns that she had. Notably, too, Wolf, last night when she was at a Democratic Party dinner, what was called a unity dinner in North Carolina, she could have gone out and said, Joe Biden is our nominee. We should stand behind him. Let's get behind him. She chose not to do that because she knew full well the concerns that so many people in the party had about Joe Biden carrying on. And undoubtedly, if she would come out publicly and say that Joe Biden should step aside, that could create even more problems for the president going forward. So the president saw the writing on the wall that this was only going to get much more difficult for the likes of people like Nancy Pelosi, potentially trying to undercut his bid if he decided to go forward and thought about going ahead. But we'll see where she lands. That is one of the questions that I've asked a bunch of Democrats today. Where will Pelosi come down? Will she endorse Kamala Harris? That's going to be a huge question this week.
All right, everybody stand by, guys. Lots going on, and a lot more is about to unfold right now as well. We're watching, as I keep saying, history unfolding here in the United States. I want to go back to Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, you've got a special guest coming up.
Yeah, Wolf, we have Senator Chris Coons here joining me. He is one of President Biden's closest allies and also the campaign co-chair. And Senator, thank you for being here. I just want to first get your reaction to, as it was just being described, one of clearly the toughest decisions President Biden has ever made.
Well, Caitlin, thanks for a chance to be on with you again. Joe Biden is a fighter. What has distinguished our president throughout decades of life is that every time he's been knocked down, he's gotten back up again. And we in Delaware, we who've served with him in the Senate, we who loved and admired him for decades, admire his fight and his toughness. And he was convinced he could continue this fight and beat Donald Trump. But the last few weeks have been a difficult process. I would rather not focus on the process at all. I think today we should focus on Joe Biden's incredible legacy of service to our nation, his selflessness, his accomplishments in his decades in the Senate, leading the Judiciary Committee and Foreign Relations Committee as vice president, and now leading the Biden-Harris administration. It bears repeating that together, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the majority in the Senate and House managed to put into law earth-shaking, historic pieces of legislation that have cut prescription drug prices, helped our veterans, paved new roads, rebuilt our manufacturing, made us stronger at home and abroad. Last week, his leadership at the NATO summit reinforced his legacy as the most consequential foreign policy president of my lifetime. This coming week, he'll be rolling up his sleeves and continuing to work on getting the peace plan for Gaza moving forward. I'll remind you, he got this plan for the release of hostages and the cessation of fighting in Gaza endorsed by the UN Security Council, endorsed by the G7. And this coming week, I know he'll be putting his heart in it once again. Yeah, this is an historic moment where our president is choosing to step aside in the best interests of the nation. And that is in the best tradition of Joe Biden's life of putting our nation before himself.
Yeah, he's meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu on Tuesday, according to the schedule. Senator, have you talked to President Biden since he made this announcement?
Yes, I have.
And what did he say to you about how he came to this? Because obviously, as you know, we were following this closely for 3 weeks. He was resisting these calls. He said what you just said there, that he did feel that he could stay in this race, that he could beat Donald Trump. What changed in his mind?
Well, look, I think I'll leave that to President Biden to speak about. I am so grateful I've had a chance to be a co-chair of his reelection campaign. We have an incredible group of loyal and determined co-chairs who have fiercely supported and defended him. And I hope I get to play a role going forward in his 6 months ahead, where he will continue to make a difference in foreign policy and here at home. I have confidence, as does our president, in Vice President Harris. I served with her in the Senate. I've seen what a difference she has made as vice president, ensuring that we get 200, more than 200 federal judges seated who are among the highest qualified, most diverse judges in our history. She has fought hard for freedoms and for rights of Americans, and she is a genuine leader. And I'm glad that President Biden has endorsed her today and made it clear the direction that he intends to take as the most respected senior leader in our party this fall. He was determined to beat Donald Trump and to make sure that the hard work he and Kamala Harris have done leading our country this last 4 years continues. And I think we should focus on that, on being united as a party and on honoring and respecting the very difficult choice Joe Biden has made today and the very great legacy that he's continued to build.
Does that mean you're also endorsing Vice President Harris as the next nominee?
I support Vice President Harris. I am very hopeful that we will come out of our convention next month united, and that everyone who has expressed concerns and hopes and thoughts and fears in the last months will continue to support the ticket that will win this fall. And we'll see what happens in terms of the choice for a running mate. But I think our president, Joe Biden, has made his endorsement clear. And I think that is the most important endorsement that we could all be paying attention to today.
What would you want to see in a running mate on a future Democratic ticket? Because obviously, this is all happening very quickly, but it's going to have to be decided quickly based on what we're hearing from Democrats and Democratic donors. Who would you like to see on that ticket?
Look, Caitlin, I think today we should focus on Joe Biden's legacy. He is someone who is so grounded in Delaware, in his faith, in his family, in our tradition of bipartisanship. And my hope is that moving forward, whoever ends up being the partner to Vice President Harris will be someone who reflects some of that tradition and those values, someone who can help win, someone who can support an effective next administration, and someone who can make the case competently, in fact, fiercely, who is a good advocate and can take on the things that we heard on the stage in Milwaukee and push them back and successfully remind the American people of the incredible accomplishments of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our president and vice president, and that the work that needs to be done is work that they can do.
Yeah, okay, so it's good to hear you say you do believe it is Vice President Harris that should be at the top of that next ticket. We'll see who, if it is her, who she would pick as her running mate. But on what you just said there, we're already seeing calls from a lot of Republicans, including the House Speaker Mike Johnson, who say that they believe President Biden should resign from the presidency. And you just talked about what a tough decision this was for him. Do you expect that he would resign? What's your response to Mike Johnson?
No.
And how tough of a call do you believe this was for him?
No, I think that is ridiculous. I think President Biden has shown in recent weeks his ability to handle and manage complex international matters, to continue his lifelong record of service and his legacy of leadership in foreign policy, and to make hard calls and tough choices that help make us stronger and safer here at home. I expect President Biden will finish out his term this year, and there are things that remain to be done. We are still negotiating our annual appropriations bill, our Defense Authorization Act. As I just said, there is critical undone work to secure peace in Gaza and a stable and more secure future for Israel and the Israeli people. Joe Biden has more experience in foreign policy than any national leader. And to have him step aside now, I think would be a grave disservice to our nation and a profound disrespect to his legacy and his lifetime of service.
And I know you've got to go, Senator Coons, you're joining us on just breaking news that is happening as of this moment. Last question. President Biden said that he'll address the nation later this week. For people watching and just kind of stunned by this news, like frankly everyone is, what do you think that they should expect to hear from him?
I think they should expect to hear from Joe Biden what he has carried in his heart for decades, which is a deep belief in the American people. Joe Biden is an optimist. He knows how hard Americans work. He knows what we are capable of. He is an optimist. I've never forgotten his inaugural speech. He inherited 3 crises. We were still in the middle of a desperate, dangerous, difficult COVID pandemic and an economic downturn caused by that pandemic and a crisis of democracy. I'll remind you, when he was sworn in, it was just 2 weeks after January 6th, and he gave an inspiring and hopeful inaugural address. There were folks who said in Washington that he couldn't possibly accomplish the great and bold vision he laid out, the optimistic vision he laid out for what we could do together if we put down the tools of partisanship, come together as a country, and legislate and solve problems. 3.5 years later, I've had a chance to watch Joe Biden sign into law landmark bills, the most consequential legislative record since LBJ. And I expect you'll hear from him when he speaks in a few days about his confidence in the American people, the urgency of our coming together and putting aside partisan bickering and embracing the bright future that our country can have if we will just work together.
Yeah, massive news from him this afternoon. Senator Chris Coons, thank you for jumping on with us on this breaking news. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Caitlin.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And if you're just joining us, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington, D.C. Caitlin Collins is joining us from New York. I want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. We're following major breaking news. President Biden has just dropped out of the 2024 presidential race and is publicly endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic presidential nominee. He made this historic and stunning announcement just before 2 p.m. Eastern earlier today, sending out a statement that reshapes the 2024 presidential race just 1 month before the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
And Wolf, we're learning that Biden made this decision within the last 48 hours, sources tell Jeff Zeleny, as Biden consulted his family, his top advisors by phone from that Delaware home. It's a decision that he kept very private, only notifying senior White House advisors and campaign staff moments before he went public with this announcement. In part, his statement said, quote, "While it may have been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term."
And Caitlin, we have our team of correspondents and analysts covering this historic breaking story. I want to go to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez. She's joining us from Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, where the president is in isolation right now. Give us the latest. What are you hearing over there, Priscilla?
Wolf, as the president was self-isolating at his residence here in Delaware from his positive COVID diagnosis, these were also days of self-reflection, days where he was clearly deliberating his next steps and whether or not he would run for re-election. We had that answer this afternoon when he put out that letter saying that he would step aside. Now, importantly, right after putting that out, he also said that he was fully throwing his support behind Vice President Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee and urging the party to come together. It was a remarkable moment after weeks of Democratic lawmakers, allies, donors calling for the president to withdraw from the race over the last few weeks. The president has had multiple private conversations with lawmakers. He has tried to assuage their concerns on the campaign trail, but none of it was enough as lawmakers were still putting out letters just yesterday telling him he had to step aside. Now, this morning, to show you how quickly all of this came together, his campaign was saying that President Biden was in it to win it, that he was staying in the race and not going anywhere. But then hours later is when he put out this letter. Now, only moments before putting this out, he had notified his senior White House and campaign teams that, according to a source who spoke with our MJ Lee, and I am also told by a source that he spoke with Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, in the moments since, donors, too, have been throwing their money behind the campaign. That, too, was a challenge for the campaign. So clearly a stunning development and one that has been shocking to campaign and White House officials.
Priscilla Alvarez with the president in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Priscilla, thank you very much. We'll get back to you. MJ Lee is our senior White House correspondent. She's joining us from the White House right now. What else are you learning, MJ?
Well, these have been some 3+ agonizing weeks for President Biden and those close to him, even amid all of the growing calls that Priscilla was just talking about since that debate in late June. The president initially had very much dug in. He made very clear that even with the polls that he was being presented with, the data that was showing that things were not looking good for him, we know of private conversations where he insisted that he was, in fact, seeing polling and data that showed that he could defeat Donald Trump. One thing that I think is so important for us to just look back on for a second is President Biden, when he was running for the presidency back in 2020, he had described himself as a bridge and a transition candidate. And after that disastrous debate performance, a lot of Democrats were asking the question of, well, whatever happened to that? And I thought we got a really insightful answer from the president on that just last week. When he was asked about this, he said, I thought I was going to be able to move from this to pass it on to someone else, but I didn't anticipate things getting so divided, is what the president said. Earlier this year, when I asked him at a press conference, basically the same question, why does it have to be you on the ticket, given that so many voters across the country have questions about your age, your health and fitness? He said because he believes that he is the most qualified person to do the job and finish the job that he had started. So the picture that has emerged, Wolf, over the course of his presidency is that the president came into this job at the White House very much intending to be a transition candidate. But once he started doing the job, it became clear to him that it was going to be more difficult than he could have ever imagined for him to pass the torch, as he had once made clear he wanted to do back in 2020. Now, we should make clear for our viewers that the president, in announcing that he was going to drop out of the race, he also endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, Harris. And now the party is in a place where even given that endorsement, they need to actually figure out the process of how they move forward and decide who that nominee is going to be. We got an important statement from former President Barack Obama, and this was a really key line. After he, of course, praised his former vice president, he said, "We will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead, but I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges." So, Wolf, just in the moments after this remarkable news from the president that he was going to be leaving the race, we have heard from a lot of different Democrats and a lot of different voices, too, who fall on different sides of the argument. Should this be sort of a coronation with the president endorsing the vice president, or should there be a process that plays out where the party really gets together and figures out who that candidate is going to be? But one thing is for clear, the clock is ticking, and this has been a concern for so many Democrats as we have all been waiting for a decision from President Biden. Wolf.
And we're just about 2 weeks or so away from that Democratic convention in Chicago that will officially nominate the Democratic presidential candidate. We're watching all of this unfold. MJ, I understand that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, has issued her first public statement. I don't know if you have it right there, but presumably it's on your phone. If you didn't have it, maybe you could read it to our viewers.
Yeah, I've got it, Wolf. We do have the first public statement from Vice President Kamala Harris in the aftermath of President Biden dropping out of the 2024 race. She says that she was honored to have received President Biden's endorsement and intends to earn and win the nomination for the presidency. This, of course, is the first time that we are hearing from him. We did report earlier that President Biden and Vice President Harris did speak on the phone earlier today. That is not surprising. Just a little bit more from the Vice President statement here. She says, "I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination." And she also says, talks about how it has been such a profound honor to have served as the president's vice president, expresses her gratitude to First Lady Jill Biden as well, and talks about sort of the relationship that they have built over the years, including the relationship that she had with the president's late son, Beau Biden. This, of course, is something that the president has talked about in the past as having been a factor when he was trying to decide who his vice presidential running mate would be back in 2020. The vice president also says in her statement, with this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life of service, putting the American people and our country above everything else. Wolf, all of the attention now is going to really be on Kamala Harris. This has already been the case for the last several weeks as we have been sort of in limbo, trying to see where the president was going to land in terms of his own decision. But of course, given that things seemed headed in the wrong direction for the president for a while now, there has been a lot of speculation about Vice President Harris and whether an endorsement formally would come from the president, which of course it has. And so now we are going to be paying close attention to everything that she does just in the coming days. How does she carry herself in public now that this news is out? Does she sort of step up her campaign operations, which according to our reporting, of course, is going to be the case. We already know that in the last several days, we have seen her sort of step up as the president has been in Rehoboth, including at the last minute jumping on a call with concerned donors just several days ago, within the last 48 hours or so. So this is something now that is totally a different situation for Vice President Kamala Harris than it was, of course, a day ago, and all attention is going to be on her as the party now figures out how they are going to move forward with this nomination process. Wolf.
If she's going to be the leader of the Democratic Party and the Democratic presidential nominee, we'll watch all of this very closely. MJ Lee, we'll get back to you. Thank you very, very much. Dramatic developments unfolding right now as well. Caitlin, I want to go back to you.
Yeah, Wolf, obviously we're monitoring this. Everything is changing by the moment here. We just got that news from Senator Chris Coons a few moments ago. That is the co-chair of the Biden campaign, getting behind Harris as the nominee as well, saying that they will talk about in the coming days who she could select to put on that ticket with her as her running mate. Obviously, a dramatic development to see Harris now in this situation. We're waiting to see what other Democrats continue to say about this. I want to go back to Van Jones because, Van, you were just talking about what this day means and the significance of this in a personal level for President Biden. But also, it's a real calculus now for Democrats of what do they do, given there are 4 months to go before the presidential election. What do you make of Harris's statement where she plans to earn and win this nomination?
I think that's very politically astute of her to say that because, again, this is a party that runs by rules, and we take the rules very seriously. Technically, Joe Biden can't just say, you're now the nominee. If Joe Biden stepped down from president, the Constitution says she's automatically president, but this is not about the Constitution. This is about the Democratic Party. And under our rules, it's the delegates who make the decision. It's not Joe Biden, it's not Kamala Harris, it's not Nancy Pelosi, it's not the Clintons, it's not the Obamas. Our delegates make the decision. And so she's being very politically astute by saying to the delegates, I am going to work to earn your support. I appreciate the support I'm getting from the Clintons and from everyone else, but I understand that it comes down to you. And by saying she's going to work to earn that support, I think that's very, very smart. So that gives the delegates the opportunity to feel that they can, they have a job to do. They have to make a decision here. Also, I think that she's letting other people know the water's warm. You want to jump in? You want to get some? You can try to earn these delegates' support as well. She's not saying, if you come against me, it's a problem. She's not closing the door. She's not saying, I accept Joe Biden, therefore I'm no. So that puts other Democrats in a very interesting position. If you're a swing state governor, if you're a rising star in this party, if you're a celebrity, if you're somebody who wants to say, look, I don't believe in Kamala Harris. I don't trust that she can win. I think I can win. What are you going to do? You're going to have to make the decision that, no, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to say, I think I could do a better job. I think I can win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. I think I've got a better shot. And I want those delegates to listen to me. So you're going to have to watch over the next 24, 48 hours. Does anybody else raise their hand and say that they want to also earn the nomination? What she's acknowledging is the nomination is not yet hers. And that's a very, very big deal. That's a true fact, but in other parties you might just have somebody just demagogue it, steamroll it, say, everybody get behind me, I am now going to lead this party. She's not doing that. Very politically astute.
But Van, you've been involved in Democratic politics your whole life. To see the Clintons, the president, top senators getting behind her as the nominee, do you think anyone else, if you are a governor or a Democrat who has a lot of star potential going forward, that they'd be brave enough to kind of get in this ring at this point with seeing who's lining up behind Harris so far?
It would take an extraordinary amount of self-confidence and belief in self to do it. But are there doors that are still open? Yes, there are doors that are still open. For instance, Pelosi hasn't yet said she's for Kamala. President Obama, as usual, is staying very, very neutral, at least publicly, to make sure that, because he is the rock star of rock stars in this party, that he doesn't tip it one way or the other. And so you do have some doors that are still open. And so, but the grade just got steeper because Joe Biden gave the endorsement. He gave it immediately. The Clintons came out immediately. It wasn't just, by the way, wasn't just Bill Clinton. Let's be fair, it was Bill Clinton and it was Hillary Clinton, a beloved, powerful nominee. The last time we nominated a woman, it was Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton came out immediately and said, I'm with Kamala. So the grade just got steeper for you, but the door is not yet closed politically. It's certainly not closed from a bureaucratic or technical point of view. Kamala Harris wants to earn that nomination. I guarantee you the whip operation, it's called a whipping operation. She had people who love her, who believe in her, who work with her for years, who are calling delegates, who are calling online personalities and other people, trying to get people ready to stick with Kamala if the ball comes to her. And so can you put together a whipping operation that's as strong as Kamala's in a short period of time? You have to look at a lot of different challenges here. But if somebody has the fire in the gut and say, listen, I don't believe Kamala can win it at the top of the ticket. I don't believe this. I don't believe that. I think I can do it. Kamala Harris just said, come on in, the water's warm.
Well, and you know what I thought about when I saw that both Clintons got behind her? I was thinking of Hillary Clinton, because she is a woman who knows what it's like to run against Donald Trump. And that could be the position we see Harris in. We don't know yet. Obviously, we are keeping our powder dry. We're waiting to see what Democrats decide here. But it does seem like that's a scenario the Trump campaign has been prepping for. They have been singling out Harris. I noticed it multiple times when you and I were in Milwaukee last week for the Republican convention. And I just wonder what, on its early basis, what you think that race would look like, a Harris versus Donald Trump.
You know, the prosecutor versus the person who got prosecuted. I mean, you know, it kind of writes itself in some ways from our side. Also, you have a younger voice. You have a younger, more dynamic presence. You have somebody who, you know, we've never seen this before. We've never seen a black female, an Asian female. You've never seen that before. And I think Trump's got to figure out how he wants to deal with it. They love to demean women. That's something that the Trump team does a lot. They do it too much. It actually goes against, you know, they put women in positions of power sometimes inside the Trump team, but they still have this public thing of just demeaning women, demeaning women. That's tougher to do when you've got someone like Kamala Harris. Is Kamala Harris going to make the abortion issue a lot tougher? You know, Kamala Harris, the first couple of years, she wasn't impressing a lot of people. Her polling numbers weren't that good. Her confidence inside the Democratic Party wasn't that high. But you've seen her over the past year get stronger and stronger on the stump. You've seen her get more and more self-confident in interviews. You've also seen the party warming up to her, especially black voters who are so critical. And so you've got a real matchup here because you've got somebody who has, you know, at times been a very, very strong in that prosecutor role. Most people think about Kamala Harris. They don't think about her as vice president. They think about her being in the Senate, grilling nominees from the Trump administration, grilling CEOs, just going after people and putting them in their place. So that side of her personality gets a chance to come forward now in a very different way. Kamala Harris won a lot of support from people when Biden stumbled. Biden stumbled. He didn't do well in the debate. Everybody was freaking out. And I was sitting right next to Anderson Cooper when Anderson Cooper brought Kamala Harris on. Mm-hmm. She was cool. She was calm. She was collected. She was strong. There was no time for anybody to hand her talking points. There was no time for anybody to write up a speech. There was no teleprompter. She had to just literally walk out there after her running mate had fallen, look in that camera, and deliver. And she delivered such a strong performance that it gave people in this party much more confidence in her. So she's riding a little bit of a wave now of momentum and support. But the door is not closed. There is a process we have to go through. There are still big donors and big figures in our party that have not yet said where they stand. So if somebody wants to jump in, it is not a done deal yet. Somebody could still yet challenge Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and a great point on age, because you know, that had been the detraction for Biden, but for Trump, he just became the oldest presidential nominee in American history. Van Jones, obviously, we're going to be watching all this very closely. Van Jones, thank you for that. Wolf, back to you.
All right, Caitlin, thank Van for me as well. Our viewers are always interested in his thoughts, very important thoughts indeed. Phil Mattingly is here with us here in Washington. Phil, you're working your sources. You're getting more information. What are you learning?
Getting a better understanding of the timeline. Obviously, we saw the letter today. I think it landed at 1:46 p.m. this afternoon. Staff was told, I think Jeff Zeleny reported earlier, was told, and MJ Lee was told 1:45 p.m. The actual process for drafting that letter, I'm told, actually started on Saturday afternoon into the evening. The president, who obviously is isolating with COVID right now, with the First Lady in Rehoboth, is long known to have a very close-knit circle of advisors, including Steve Ricchetti, who's been with him since the vice president's office, Mike Donnellan, who's kind of his personal mind meld messaging guru as well. They were both called last night and informed that the president wanted to start this process of drafting the letter. Steve Ricchetti was responsible for handling the mechanics of how this would all roll out and how it would all be discussed and released publicly. And so that process started on Saturday night. We know that they've been weighing this process over the course of the last 48 hours as the data continued to come in. And what I'm told is that there was a recognition that there was simply not going to be a way to turn it around, even though for weeks they thought it was possible. The Democratic infighting, the almost internal intra-party fratricide to some degree, was just weighing down things too much, and it was time to make this decision and move forward with the decision that we saw today from the president. His close advisors, it's worth noting, Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donnellan and the First Lady as well, they were all in the room in 2016 when the president was considering whether or not to run in that campaign to primary Hillary Clinton. It was actually Mike Donnellan at that time, at least according to President Biden and his book, who told President Biden that in the wake of the death of his son, Beau, that in one of their final meetings that it was not the right time. He was not ready to do it. And so that's kind of the relationship they have. It's a very, very close circle. And that circle was once again called into action last night as they started moving this process forward.
Was it the poll numbers that were so disturbing to the president? Was it the fact that fundraising may be going down? Was it the public statements statements coming out from all these Democrats in the House and the Senate, for example. What were the main factors that caused him to rethink? Because until yesterday, until now, we had been repeatedly told, not just by the president, but all of his senior campaign advisors and White House officials, he's in it to win it. He's not going anywhere.
And my understanding is that was very much the view of things. I think there's no singular factor here. It's a convergence of all of these issues into one. But more than anything else, what I've been told over the course of the last several hours is it's the weight of the Democratic infighting, the fact that the president could not get past this moment to make the case, to draw the contrast, to have the actual kind of binary re-election battle that he was searching for, that they believe that they can win. That was kind of the overarching reason why. But I do think the money, the Democratic support, I think there's a recognition too. Lawmakers are going to be back in town this week, and it was only expected to build. And when leaders got microphones in their faces, what were they going to say? They were out last week during the Republican convention, and so there was a recognition over the course of the last 48 hours that this was probably the path that needed to be taken. Launched last night, and obviously announced today.
And to Phil's point, I mean, I was told that it was the weight of what all this has done on the Democratic ticket overall, and the difficulty and the much more uphill challenge it was to defeat Donald Trump. I mean, President Biden has read polls for literally since the invent of political polling. His career has tracked that trajectory, but when told that he was really weighing down the Democratic ticket, I'm told that was something that he finally came to realize. I'm also told that he was making some calls sort of outside. We talk a lot about the tight circle of advisors, was calling some people even outside of that, trying to get their read on things. So he was really working this, trying every way possible to find a way to stay in, but the reality just became way too much. And yesterday, the letter from the national security advisors, former national security advisors on the team, all these officials, that also cut very deeply at him. And if he would have decided to stay in the race, he has been trying to make Donald Trump the disqualified candidate. Suddenly, all of these Democratic officials who have come out and spoke to us over the last 3 weeks, those would be used in ads against him. So taken together, all of this, it was just too much.
It was a dramatic, historic moment indeed, and we have a lot more news coming up. We're going to take a quick break. Much more of our very special breaking news coverage of this historic day here in the United States right after this.
It's hard to watch yourself be pulled out of a building by a tornado.
Okay, nature boy, what's that bird then?